Actually, today, instead of rolling a blunt, I decided that I was just gonna roll a J, and we're gonna do that instead. So today's topic is gonna be about food, and I don't really think I know whether you guys even are aware, but I am a vegetarian and have been for 6 years, or well, going on 6 years. And see if I can pin this. There we go. Okay, I pinned it. Okay. So, because I am vegetarian, everyone kind of has this preconceived notion about how I may act towards people. And I'm here to first off and say that's not how I am. This could be snack. I don't judge other people for eating meat or consuming dairy, because I know that that type of judgment from my end can definitely come off pretty harsh, and it does come off harsh at any point in time to other individuals coming from not me, like it turns them off. So I try not to judge. I just put out information that people may or may not know, and then hopefully maybe take them or treat them or show them different type of vegetarian or vegan friendly places or recipes around me, because on Long Island there's at least a nice amount of healthier options, and not everywhere is like that, and I'm aware of that, because it's unfortunate that health sometimes is treated as a privilege. But small baby steps. Oh, my cat is calling. That's lovely. And that's all that matters. I don't. The small baby steps are how I try to do it myself. I'll try at least every single day when I wake up to make the first meal that I have more plant-based or vegan, and then if I have the ability to make sure that I can do that for lunch or dinner, then I definitely do that. And there have been periods of time in which I've been able to consistently keep that up, and then other times I feel like I fall back on it just because of convenience, and that's obviously not okay for myself, because I do tend to get down on myself. But I find that if I just take it one meal at a time, then I can do it. But it's more so for me a matter of convenience that kind of stops me, and that's something I know I personally need to work on. But also, sometimes I feel like when I come home from work, because I work like 2 different jobs, that I get a little bit tired, and it stops me from cooking at home. And I know that, like, for some people that's not the only problem, like that's not just a problem that I have, that other people have it, and like that's a problem that other people have that stops them from changing their own diet, because it is a lifestyle change. You have to end up getting rid of that matter of, oh, this is convenient, I can go here and get this, and it'll have, like dairy or meat or something, and you have to shift to making stuff at home, going to the store, preparing everything yourself. And some people it's not as accessible. And I feel like that is a big issue. And it's almost like it kind of is set up in that way, especially if you are in like a small town or a rural area where you don't have as much variety in like supermarkets or like restaurants or different like places of eateries, you know. Give me 1 second. Of course, I don't know why. The cat always wants to come in here. The room is ventilated. There's a fan going on. But, you know, cats, if you are a cat owner. So, 1 second. Let me stare at the lovely little sloth. That was a birthday present from Jay and Max, my lovely friends. So thank you very much. 2 seconds. Welcome. Please. You must relax. Thank you. But also, when it comes to veganism and like plant-based diets, there is sometimes that type of inaccessibility for some people in some places. Living in New York and on Long Island, it's really great because there's so much variety for different types of food, different like cultures of food, and it keeps the variety and like being able to stick to that type of diet like way easier. But there are some people out there who need to have a lot more variety through their diet. And if you don't have that type of variety, it gets boring, and sometimes some people's dedication may not be all the way there, especially if they're just starting out. They find that, you know, like their routine is like either like shifting too much, or they like feel their health being impacted or something. Having that type of variety is helpful. And when you live in a small area, not as populated, you definitely don't see as much small business. You may have only like 1 or 2 restaurants, and they're typically chains. And those chains, yeah, correct, they don't really have that much plant-based variety. It has to be tailored, and that's annoying. It's an imposition sometimes, and even I feel bad myself going to a restaurant and asking them to like, can you please change the menu? Can you do all that? Like, it just, I don't like doing that. So having the variety on Long Island that we do is definitely helpful, but I can't get angry at people or judge people if they're unable to do that themselves. And I think that's sometimes an issue that the community faces, and it puts people off like from joining. I'm not a big follower of like groups in a sense. I like kind of just being my own person, but I definitely do like to like congratulate especially the individuals who don't put their judgments on others, or that they don't project it, or they just are patient, because I have noticed that like it's the patience that over time does really help. And like even my friends, like when I offer to like recommendations for restaurants, they'll take them, and knowing that they might be more vegetarian or vegan friendly, they'll still listen and be like, you know what, like I trust this person's taste, like I'm gonna go try that. And it's nice to have that ability, but that's like a patient type thing, you know, like you have to be able to like not get down on people for taking their own time to walk along a path. But hey, I'm reading this. And I also tend not to even judge. Now I know this is gonna come out wrong, but I try not to judge any hunters. If you're a hunter that lives in a rural area and you live off of that and that is how you survive, I cannot judge you. Because if that's a monetary reason that it stops you from like going to the store so much, or you just don't live by a store so much like that, and it's just that is your capability of eating, how can, hey, you're silly. How can I sit there and judge somebody's way of nourishing themselves? Like, I can't do that. At that point, it is an issue where they are living, and at that point, they don't have the money to move. That I can't judge them, and they're doing what nature had intended in the first place. They're not industrializing. They're not going to the supermarket, not putting in the work or effort to go get that food. They're hunting it themselves. They're taking that time because that's what they have to do. And that animal most likely lived a natural life, and it wasn't factory raised. Factory raised animals are subjected to poor living conditions. They're subjected to drug use and like antibiotics put into their feed, and their feed is not even what they naturally would be eating in the wild. So if you go to the supermarket and get that type of meat, that's clearly not as natural, healthy, or morally correct as compared to somebody who went out and did it themselves and used the whole animal. Because down in the mountains or forests, like, people that's like Appalachia, that's what they do, and that's their livelihood, and that's how can I impose my privilege of having the variety and the monetary capability of buying vegan or plant-based products on them when it's not even there, And that becomes an issue when people try to impose that stuff. And that's also, it's like, that's a privilege standpoint. Not everybody is capable of having like the land to do that, like farm themselves. Of course, like a lot of times, like hunters, like they go to public lands and like with the permits, they'll take care of that, and that's a lot different than having money and owning a farm and the land. And that land isn't always accessible to certain communities because it takes money, like a lot, or you're going to be subjugated to certain types of treatments if you're living in a small town sometimes, and that's not healthy either. And it's a lot of factors come into it. And yes, wild animals typically have more of the nutrients that they naturally are supposed to be consuming. Trying not to cough so much. Versus the factory raised animals that are fed like the corn feed and then like the antibiotics that are supposed to keep them from getting like the flu and everything from being so on top of one another. And like, fun fact about factory raised salmon, farm raised versus wild caught, has a very big difference. because farm raised, they have to inject the beta carotene color into the salmon flesh, because naturally in the wild, the salmon would eat nutrients that would give them that beta carotene color in their skin, like their flesh. But because that's not what they consume in farm raised conditions, they have to like inject it into it. And of course you can see the difference between fresh caught and farm raised. But people always sit there and say that there is a difference between naturally raised food versus like factory raised food. And I say that broadly because it's not just like meat, you know, which is consumed and tastes different, because wild meat typically has a game flavor versus like factory raised chicken or steak. But even freshly harvested and grown vegetables or fruits without pesticides or herbicides or certain types of fertilizers or whatever fertilizer you do use, it affects what grows. And conventional fruits and vegetables that may have like tons of herbicides and insecticides and everything like that, they taste way different, and they typically don't have as much flavor as compared to food that is organically raised or home grown, like raised. And once again, there's a difference in nutrients there and the accessibility, and that's also not okay. And it's a system because there are laws set up that like specifically stop certain communities from being able to farm on their own land, or I don't even mean like farm, I mean like have a little garden, like a little flower bed type, like, oh, I can put tomatoes here or cucumbers or peppers or something. Like there are certain states that actually like bar their residents from doing that, and there are certain states that bar their residents from collecting rainwater, or like there are other states that have like there's actually called the cheeseburger law that bars any types of film occurring at slaughterhouses because of the conditions that go on. And now a lot of times I get it, you come off as like, oh, we're only worrying about the animals, but reality is the working conditions aren't fucking awesome either. Like they're really fucking bad. And a lot of times, who the fuck wants to work? Who the fuck wants to work at a slaughterhouse or a processing plant like that, unless like you absolutely fucking have to? Well, guess what? Guess who typically works there? Undocumented workers or ex-convicts, and they're subjugated to those horrific conditions, and no one really gives a second thought to that. And that's not okay either, because it's all about producing profit. So they have to work really fast to get as much product out as possible because of our rapid consumption of meat, and that's not healthy. This country consumes meat like in excess a lot, but they're subjugated to those horrible conditions, and that's not healthy for anybody to work in, because then they go home essentially numb and apathetic. They're only really left with getting those types of jobs because no one is going to take it. And a lot of times they're not offered any proper breaks or benefits, and it's dangerous on those jobs. It's not always done by hand or anything like that. There's machinery, and if you're working really fast with others on top of each other, you can make mistakes. You can get hurt very easily. And then on top of that, because it's an essential business, and we even saw that during the beginning of COVID, is that there are people on top of one another, constantly working, trying to get as much product as we could because of the hoarding and everything that people were trying to do when going grocery shopping. And people were getting sick. They're fucking contracting, like COVID and everything, and then they're putting everyone else at risk because they're gonna eat that food. And, there was that, thought that, vegans and vegetarians don't have to worry about that shit or something like that, but it still happens for our fruit and vegetable processing, farmers and everything like that. They don't get the same rights either. And I don't really see much effort being made to really remedy that, give them any type of protection or benefits during this, knowing that they are essential employees. Yes. Meat. There are other documentaries out there that do talk about the harmful effects of overconsumption of meat. There are also books as well, but no, humans are not meant to consume this much animal protein in this manner. And a lot of times when humans are consuming any meat, it's at an imbalance to how you are supposed to be consuming any type of protein. Some people get double protein and extra meat on their food, and that's just too much protein, not enough fiber. I'm gonna say you might be constipated later on. That's kind of gross. But when we were kids, I know that we were taught those weird fucking food pyramids, and it changed all the fucking time. And it put the base as grains. And then I don't even remember how it went. Then it was meat and fucking fish or something, and then maybe fucking fruits and vegetables, and then dairy high up. And I'm like, wait a minute, why is a starch the base? That's binding and heavy as hell. And fucking, you're supposed to have half of your meal as being fiber, healthy, green fiber, whether it's leafy greens, salad, other types of vegetables or something. That is supposed to help ease all of the rest of the food that you're gonna eat that is pretty binding. If you are a meat eater, you eat that. Beans or other types of protein grain, like couscous or quinoa or wheat berries or something like that, and then a starch, and that is the healthier manner now. But how many people also eat that? How many people make sure they can eat that? It's, if you're overworked, convenience is very easy. And if you are constantly opting for convenience, it will hurt you over time. But some people don't have the privilege of being able to notice that, or care about it because they have to go to work. It's just, they have to do it, and it's sad because we did have a president whose wife tried to, help the country, making them healthier, everything like that. And of course, everyone shat on her for it, like, completely, like, and I get it, because there were certain times in which it, like, affected more privileged areas, and they were just like, well, what the fuck? I wanted the sugary drinks. And it's like, oh my god, that's not the point. Like, in certain places... Oh, Mama, please. Jesus, okay. I gotta love a cat. Okay. Featuring Marquise. Okay, awesome. In other places, it really affected, like, the convenience of food, like the unhealthy shit, and it showed a disparity in, like, food accessibility. And there is, like, even, like, food, like, systemic racism in there, like power plants and industrial, like, plants or slaughterhouses. They're near poor neighborhoods, and, like, statistically, like, we don't care about poor neighborhoods, what happens to them, and they face the highest rate of health issues, or like, rates of death at, like, middle age or young age due to health complications. And our type of overconsumption really has a cause and effect on other people's lives, and it's really unfortunate, because capitalism, has those lobbyists that go off and try to keep this shit happening, like the lobbyists from, like, Monsanto, Bayer, go off and try and lobby to make sure that you can fucking keep using your Roundup all over the place, which harms, like, our wildlife and naturally changes their diet, and then it changes, like, the natural nutrients and a lot of fruits and vegetables, and it's harmful to the people that inhale it and everything. And then it doesn't just go nowhere. We have wind, like, cycles that will push it through the air, and if you are next to an industrial farm, you're just taking in all that chemical shit. And if you watch, like, Fork Over Knives, like, on Netflix, like, they interview certain families that have to live next to power plants or slaughterhouses that you just smell it, and that's unhealthy. You can't... They've sat there and they showed, like, on, like, one of the families had, like, multiple people, and the family die early on from, like, cancer or, other, health, like, diseases caused, like, by, like, chronic, just, like, inhalation of the chemicals. And that's not, obviously that's not natural. And that's also from, like, meat consumption, and get, if you live, like, in a city, going hunting is not something that's doable. But, like, does it really always have to come to, like, does the meat consumption always have to really come to that price? Like, does it really have to cost that much? And I don't mean, like, monetary value. I'm just meaning, like, the impact level. Like, the slaughterhouses and factory farmings are, like, factory farms and everything like that are, like, a major cause for our air pollution, like methane and like in the ozone and everything like that. And that's one of the major greenhouse gases that are, like, really harming us. And then you fucking... no one's really stopping it. And it's just like, is that really the cost? Does it have to really be that cost? And if everyone were able to actually, instead of having to overwork themselves because they can't afford to live because they don't have a fucking payable like a livable wage, everyone to actually be able to cut back their time at work and enjoy like experimenting with their food and everything like that, maybe they wouldn't have to constantly just rely on that convenience of like overconsumption of meat, you know, or especially like if you go to a fast food restaurant, like you know that they're getting their meat from like an unethical farm or something, because you know like it's factory produced, you know, it's made for people who are going to eat a lot of it, you know, and that's being a more spiritual person. I just find that eating meat that was not harvested like from like a fruitful life, it's different. I never went hunting, and I've never had any meat that was like hunted or before or anything like that, but just like the idea of eating something that had to live a shallow life, or like they never saw the light of day, or they were stolen from their parents, just like you can already tell, like, you know, like if that were a human, like that would be painful to live with enough, but then you fucking add like you're gonna be consuming that flesh, and it didn't get like the proper amount of vitamin D or the proper nutrients it would in the wild that would give it the minerals that would be healthy to you. That's the whole point of consuming meat, is to consume the energy for ourselves. And it's baffling how removed society has become from that, because you can't afford to think about that anymore or something, you know. Let me just read that. Yes, I believe so. That is the same documentary. I've watched like a whole like bunch of them, but it is a privilege to be living where I live, knowing that I have like at least 3 supermarkets within like a 2-mile radius. And other places are not like that. I remember living in Virginia, like, if you did not have a car, you could not get to a supermarket. And yes, like, it's a hassle here, it's inconvenient here to have to use the bus or something like that to go to the supermarket and everything like that. It is, like, believe me, like, I've had to do it. It's not fun. But it's doable because it's accessible, but in rural areas, it's not. You're away from it. And then, of course, the variety in the food in those areas, in those supermarkets, are also not as similar to demand here. And, like, even you, like, see it in regional demand, like, in different towns on Long Island, you know. This Stop and Shop here tries to get more, like, healthier, like, products, but kind of fail a little bit, in my opinion. Based off of produce and everything like that. But other areas, like a different Stop and Shop, maybe like in like on the South Shore I've been to, like Belmore doesn't have the same variety, and like manufacturers or like suppliers will send different stuff different places, and that affects people's diets, obviously. And it's almost like they want certain places to rely on those unhealthy things, because having food that really doesn't have vitamins and nutrients that it's supposed to, that affects your brain. Obviously, when you're younger, you don't really notice it, but try a diet right now where you are just eating like a whole bunch of like nutrient deficient food, like fried food or something like that, which sometimes some people that's all they can have. But tell me how your body will feel, and then tell me how that normal becomes. And it is, yeah. That song Hard came on, and it's like, yeah, that shit is difficult, and that's a normal for people. And if that's a normal for people and they have to live like that and then they're exhausted, it's like, how often, yes, can you blame them? Maybe sometimes they can set aside some time to go make some like meal prep time or something, but then other times, like, what if they can't? Like, literally, what if they can't? Just like think of that offset, and like if that is somebody's normal, that's what they have to fucking do. Like, holy shit, like, how can somebody survive like that? How can somebody fucking take the time out of their day afterwards and be like, I have energy to like watch the like news or read something, or like, and personally enrich myself, or like go like exercise. If you can't do that, like, it's a domino effect. It snowballs, like hits into other areas of your world, and it's like, how many areas are affected like that, in a sense? How many areas are actually like living as that is their normal way of life, and how many people were subjugated to that verse? How many people were able to get away from that? And there's like a part of humanity that also like just always wants to judge and say like, oh, like, you can always do it yourself, you can get out of it. And it's like, yes, if you have the privilege and opportunity to do it, but sometimes you don't. And then if you don't, why do we have to subjugate people to that type of standard? And then that idea almost, it's like, it's not even like a top priority. People don't sit there and put too much funding into, there's definitely not much funding into like farming and agriculture now, even though like government wants to sit there and say, oh, we're for like rural states and farmers because they're putting the votes in for the party in power now. But for years, decades, even like since we had the surplus of corn and as our cash crop and everything, it's inflated the price of that cash crop for farmers. It means that what they produce is definitely not it's not being treated what it's worth. And especially to keep up with demand from where all the corn goes and everything, they have to overextend themselves on machinery, or they cut corners with their workers, and they don't either. Exactly. Bootstrap liquors and everything like that. And they get the short end of the stick because they're supposed to be the backbone of America, but it's almost like they're like, here, have some scoliosis or something, like, fuck you. And that's not okay. And they get forgotten, and it's, if they're so essential, why are they not being treated essentially like farmers and their workers and everything? Like, that's, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck? Like, I'm sure, like, if you haven't seen it around, but like Driscoll berries are like, they're still in like lawsuits or, you know, issues with their farmers because they're not being treated fairly. They're not getting the benefits that they're supposed to. They're not being paid fair wages. Oh my goodness, they're getting paid like $2 or something. And yes, as like, you know, they're carnists, people who only consume meat and like to shit on vegetarians or vegans, who like to say, oh, look how your vegetables harm others. It's like, well, sorry, you're supposed to be having fruits and vegetables as well, so this is a you thing too. But then it's like, yeah, we give a fuck about this shit. Like, it's not okay that somebody has to truly suffer to survive. They're not safe while they're doing it, and they're not being treated humanely while it's happening, and they are necessary. Farmers and people who provide us food are fucking necessary, and it needs to be taken more seriously, you know? Like, yes, healthcare needs to be taken seriously, like, you know, like gun control and everything like that, that needs to be taken seriously. Like, we need to take seriously, like, you know, how much we spend on military, but like our health, like in terms of food, like that needs to be taken seriously. Like, but right now we have people in power that are like, they've all made deals with the devil, and they all take money from like dark corporations and shit like that who don't give a fuck about humanity. You know, like, we've had laws been blocked from being written in that would allow us to monitor farms and how they actually like raise and produce all of the products and everything. And like, you know, in Europe they account for everything. Like, their products have packaging that tells them everything. And here we literally had a law like be written so it would bar that information from being put on products. Like, wait a minute. Why would you write that into a law? What are you trying to hide? It's a little bit baffling. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna end it here. I appreciate those of you who have been in here. It's all for you. Thank you. But if you have any suggestions on upcoming topics, you can feel free to direct message me. And I hope to see you next time. And thank you for joining me this time. Have a good night. Bye.